Hey guys, welcome back. So now we are getting into the death of Doctor Strange, which early on is showing the signs of a very good and very compelling series. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so with the way this starts is broken up into two chapters, with the first chapter starting as a strange day, which really for the most part just seems like a regular day for Doctor Strange, with a couple of events that are a bit extra sprinkled in. But first thing in the morning you have the case to where Bats is waking him up, and it's funny because Bats is asking Doctor Strange to take him for a walk, which Bats really doesn't need because he's not alive, but Bats tells Strange that it's more so for him because he needs to stay in shape. But even still, it's one of those things that makes sense that Bats is even concerned, because before his original owner had a heart attack, and in Loki Sorcerer Supreme, so did Bats. So it's one of those things to where it makes sense that he's concerned for Strange, because he really doesn't want him to fall to the same demise due to lack of exercise. But also as this continues, we get a bit of narration from Doctor Strange about his fascination with Koshi the Deathless, but we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But as he continues to go on with his morning routine, he then pulls the image of his former wife Clea, and though there's really no context initially to what he may be thinking about her, it is something that we're shown later on. But as he goes on his way and just like grabs a cup of coffee for Wong, and he heads out, but through his narration with him talking about his interest in Koshi the Deathless and how Strange was always fascinated with how Koshi had cheated death, with Koshi taking a small piece of his life or his soul and hiding it away within a hidden place within a hidden place within a hidden place, which is something that then had made Koshi immortal by not allowing the entirety of his soul to be subject to a traditional death. And as we follow Strange as he makes his way to the hospital, he then also admits that part of his motivation with becoming a surgeon, that it had also been inspired by Koshi as well. Because if nothing else, surgeons are cheating death every day, with putting their expertise to use, with either removing one thing or correcting another, to where otherwise if that surgeon hadn't done anything, then in a number of cases a lot of these people would have died a lot sooner. And I gotta say, and even with saying this, I feel like every time we talk about Doctor Strange, I say this, but in the case of Doctor Strange, one of my favorite things about him, it's not so much the fact of him just being a sorcerer or the Sorcerer Supreme, but instead it's more so the one thing that sets him apart from a number of different magic users who in a number of cases may even be more powerful. But in the case of Doctor Strange, who was a surgeon first, he uses that approach with the mystic arts. Like for instance, with a surgeon, you trust them in their expertise because of their knowledge, their years of dedication and practice, and in the moment that they're carrying on with whatever operation, you trust that they're using every tool at their disposal or even the latest forms of technology in order to save your life. And for Doctor Strange, I've always loved that he's approached the mystic arts with that same level of conviction, with him borrowing power from a countless number of sources and even using them in combinations that are unconventional, but nonetheless it comes down to him using the focus and the precision with magic that just sets him apart from so many others, which is something he really needs to do after being nerfed by the Vishanti. But also with Doctor Strange kind of taking this moment to return to the surgeon position, and he expresses how it feels brand new again because of how much his life has changed since he's become the Sorcerer Supreme. But once he's sterile and he grabs the knife, nerves don't matter, his hands know what to do. Which is another thing to keep in mind, because we gotta talk a bit more about that too, in just a little bit. But then not long after Doctor Strange successfully completes the surgery, he then hears this large explosion, which he then goes to tend to, and when he does, there's this guy who summoned a bunch of power that he can't control, and to whom this guy I believe is Pavel Plotnik, who at one point during Strange Tales, he had shot Doctor Strange during a duel of the mystic arts. And it wasn't like a magic gun, he didn't conjure it with magic, but in the middle of the duel he was just like, you know what, bump this, and he just pulled out a pistol. But when Strange finds him here, losing control after trying to link himself to the 7 sons of Cenobus, at this point it's become a very hostile situation, and even to the point to where he's nearly shot by a couple of officers. But when Strange steps in and he tells the officers to stand down, and he lets them know like this guy doesn't need a bullet, he needs a doctor. But with this happening, not only does it show us that Strange is better than me, because I'd have just been like karma, but it also takes us through the idea of Doctor Strange still very much being a doctor even in the position of Sorcerer Supreme, with him diagnosing the situation and severing the link successfully, which he expresses is the same to him as surgery. And then after this, we then see him go by the Strange Academy in New Orleans, which is the school that he had established not too long ago in order to train younger sorcerers. And when he stops by, he's pretty much giving them a breakdown of the responsibilities of being the Sorcerer Supreme, and even with doing so, he informs them of some of his duties that come along with his position, much like his duties of maintaining the barrier, which is a master spell, which keeps the Dark Dimension, the Celestial Concordance, and a number of other outer planes from just invading their reality. And he lets them know, like, he's not just telling them this because he likes to talk about what he does, but he informs them because when it comes to the time when he's no longer Sorcerer Supreme, it's very possible that the next Sorcerer Supreme may be in this room. And when that time comes, after his tenure in this position is over, which pretty much means in the time of his untimely death, and I only say that because his retirement is unlikely, but either way, when this happens, the Vishanti, they will call for another. But then after this, when class is dismissed, he's then chased down by Doyle, who, if it wasn't obvious, he's the son of Dormammu. But with him chasing down Doctor Strange, he tells him that something feels weird, with him naturally having a connection to the Dark Dimension, and him chasing Doctor Strange down to let him know that he senses something going on in the outer planes. And with hearing this, Strange is aware that something is off, but the conversation is then cut short when Doctor Strange is called to the baseball diamond to handle an incursion. And when he gets there, he then comes to find out that there's a number of demons who have escaped from Limbo, claiming that they've come to harvest the souls of the Earth's children in order to satiate his hunger so that they could be spared. And with them saying this, is really one of those things to where Doctor Strange was like, you know, can you make it plain? But they really don't go into any further detail because Magic, she pretty much cuts it off there, and together both her and Doctor Strange send them all back to Limbo and they seal the breach. But throughout this strange day, there is a bit of business as usual. But even in the case of Doctor Strange, business as usual, it's still strange and unusual to not just your common person or even other heroes, but even in comparison to other sorcerers, to where in that case, it's mainly because of the responsibilities that he has as Sorcerer Supreme, which have also allowed him to meet a number of exceptionally unique friends and companions along the way, and even lovers, but even along that journey, he's lost a number of them as well. But after this, with us later catching up with him at the Sanctum Sanctorum, it's here where he's winding down for the day and he gets a knock at the door. And with him going to answer in his robe, he does take a minute to get a bit spiffy because at the end of the day, literally, like you don't know who this could be. But as it turns out, when he answers the door, we see right away that he recognizes who it is, although we're not shown anything more than just a shadowy figure. And with seeing his response to this person, it almost appears as if he doesn't feel any threat of any sort. But this then changes quickly as soon as he's attacked with a power that he would describe as overwhelming and unconceivable, but also familiar to him. Terribly so, which I feel like is a bit of a hint, and we'll get back to that. And really it's here in this moment within his thoughts that we get a bit of a glimpse of some of the things that we could only assume that he was thinking of earlier, with us seeing him looking at an old picture of Clea or talking to the young students at the academy and giving them the lecture on the preparation for the next Sorcerer Supreme. Because it's here in this moment to where he thinks to himself that it's good that his friends aren't here because they couldn't help him. But even with that being the case, it doesn't mean that he doesn't want them here, but he just knows that if they were here, that there was nothing that they could do. But that doesn't negate the fact that he does not want to die alone. But then suddenly with this attack, everything just goes dark. And this is what takes us into chapter 2, the lonely death of Dr. Stephen Strange. And from here we just jump to Shaman, Thor, Magic, Wong, Bats, Reed Richards, and a number of others all over the world because they already know what has happened, because they feel the shift. And I mean everyone except for Reed Richards, he more or less got an Amber Alert. But with a number of them rushing to the Sanctum to help their friend, when they get there it's too late. Because by the time they arrive, Doctor Strange has already been killed and both of his hands are missing. Which also feels like one of those clues from the huge like whodunit type stories. Like when we get to the end and Scooby and his friends, they take the mask off. Because I'm pretty sure his missing hands are like critical to the plot. But then after this, when Baron Mordo then makes his way here, like it doesn't take long for people to assume that it was him that did it. And right away when he just walks in, Wong is the first to accuse him, and it nearly starts off a battle between him and Kaecilius. But even Baron Mordo admits that as much as he wanted Doctor Strange dead, that he didn't do this. And in fact, in a way he feels robbed of the opportunity, which is kind of a messed up thing to say over a dead man's body. But even with Baron Mordo arriving here, this is then interrupted when a call comes in from Captain America that was meant for Doctor Strange in an attempt to inform him that a number of portals around the world have just opened up, placing the world in utter and complete chaos, which of course is the situation because the Sorcerer Supreme is no longer sustaining the barrier. But in the middle of all this with like Bats mourning Doctor Strange, and all these crazy alerts, as well as Wong and Kaecilius at each other's throats, but suddenly this magic door opens and it's here coming out through this door where we then get the arrival of classic Doctor Strange. Because a long time ago, when Doctor Strange was much younger, he had managed to hide a piece of his soul within a hidden place, within a hidden place, within a hidden place. And from what it seems here, he hid that piece away when he was way more powerful. And because of that, I'm excited to see what the return of classic Doctor Strange is gonna bring. But then also at the same time, in a weird way, I also feel like he's the #1 suspect in this whole thing. Cause if I locked a piece of myself away, I'd be mad at me. And I mean mad as hell. Pun intended. Alright, so like in events like this one, or even in solo series, we have the main character that dies in the first issue. Like when this happens, I usually count it as like a good sign, because when you kill them off early, they're more likely to come back in the end. Versus if they die at the end, like we'd see with Flash Thompson in Amazing Spider-Man issue 800, because when that's the case, it's kind of a recipe for we're not going to see you for a while. But for Doctor Strange, he's way too poppin' in the Marvel landscape. And in his case here, before the body's even cold, we get the appearance of classic Doctor Strange. But leading up to this point, even in just the first issue, we've kind of been primed for this to happen, with Doctor Strange speaking of Koshi and how he cheated death by hiding a piece of his soul within a needle, within an egg, within a duck, within a rabbit, and so on and so forth. And essentially what we come to find here is that Doctor Strange, he had pulled off the same, and that slither of his soul has returned to solve the mystery of his death. But also with the Sorcerer Supreme dead, the protection barrier around the world is no longer up, and not really sure why he didn't put that spell into post-death cruise control. But either way, he didn't, and here we are. But with this happening, you have like the appearance of a number of deep-cut Doctor Strange villains, and many from a number of years of exile, like in the case of Agamon, who made his way here first, attacking in the Gobi Desert. And in his case, once again, he's one of those characters who is interesting to see in a series about the death of Doctor Strange, because when Agamon faced Doctor Strange in a duel to the death, they were literally at a standoff for hours. And it was at a point to where if one didn't give up, then they both were gonna die. And eventually it came to the point to where Agamon was just like, look bruh, it ain't that serious. And he forfeit the challenge to Doctor Strange, who in his case, Doctor Strange didn't flinch at the sight of death. And with Agamon being the first to come back, I kinda got this feeling he has a bit of I told you so in his system, like he knew Doctor Strange was eventually gonna die, running around like that, just not giving up. Like he just knew somebody was gonna kill Doctor Strange sooner or later. But then next up we have Dagoth the Seaborn, to where in his case he had raised the sunken city of Kalamesh from the sea floor, but also in his case he's calling due archaic blood depths from old families who still remembered their ancient allegiances to him. But in the case of Dagoth, he's another throwback Doctor Strange villain who had appeared for a short while back in Marvel Premiere in the early 70s, to where he later became more of a Conan thing. But for him, we're shown that he's re-raising the city of Kalamesh, which had been sunken countless years ago, after its people forsook their elder ones, which represented good, to then later worship Dagoth, who serves Shumagora. But in this case, he wanted the people to worship him and the blood sacrifices to go to Shumagora to give him strength. So with just seeing that, just a heads up, there's potential for this to get dark. But lastly, and just as an honorable mention, and not even an honorable mention, just a mention, but when Kalamesh had went down into the sea, for one, all the people who served Dagoth, they died. But we have seen cases to where people who have served Dagoth, who were later then reincarnated and had the memories of their years of servitude or even carrying out the sacrifices in that previous life. So just want to say that that was a thing too. But then aside from this, we also get the return of Tiboro, who's a Peruvian magician who I believe was banished at one point to the 6th dimension. But this dude is crazy powerful, and it's said that he had taken over the entire world at one point, but later we kind of had this thing to where Doctor Strange turned him to stone, and then after that America Chavez had like destroyed him, but he's back now and he's not stone, so we'll see if he explains it. But then over in Antarctica, we see Umar, the twin sister of Dormammu, who has already manifested a portion of her kingdom. But then after this, going back over to the Sanctum Sanctorum, like with classic Doctor Strange just showing up, and initially there's a lot of suspicion, but between Dr. Voodoo, Zelma, and even Bats, they all confirmed that it's definitely him. But one of the things that was shown pretty early is that when Doctor Strange had made this contingency, it wasn't one of those things to where this Strange would show up and he would just know everything that the late Doctor Strange had done, and because of that, this Doctor Strange has a lot of catching up to do. Like for instance, when Kaecilius sees him and he goes off about Doctor Strange throwing him in the purple dimension, this Doctor Strange does not remember any of that, with it happening more or less after he was created. But really, it isn't too long before this Doctor Strange explains the whole reasoning of how he pulled this off, after Wong asks him to pretty much just make it make sense. And the way that Doctor Strange explains this is that many years ago, he took 1 week from his personal timeline and cut it from his lifespan, so that at his time of death, a temporal remnant would be able to reassure that he had all of his affairs in order. And he took that week from his life and he hid it away, a secret from all, like the needle in the egg, in the duck, and in the rabbit. But also with Doctor Strange creating this contingency, this portion of him that is literally 1 week of his life, it's only able to exist for 7 days, and after that, it's gone. But with that said, he literally has a ticking time clock in order to have his killer brought to justice. But aside from this, when Zelma sees that Doctor Strange is getting more messages from the Avengers, she then hands the ID card to Throwback Doctor Strange. But when he gets the message from Captain America about the multiple invasions from all sorts of dimensions, and it's here where we see that this Doctor Strange hasn't met Captain America yet. Like, he knows who he is, but they just haven't met. But in response, he tells Captain America, like, you know, the Doctor Strange you know, he's dead, my condolences, which is kind of funny for him to say, but at the same time, like, how do you have this conversation? But also, like, with even talking about this, it reminds me of a meme I seen where the dude was like, at my funeral, take the bouquet off my casket and throw it in the crowd so we can see who's next. Talk about a plot twist. But at this point, after classic Doctor Strange has been briefed on everything that's going on, he's then like, well, okay, let's get the current Sorcerer Supreme. But when everybody just kind of stops and just stares at him like, that's supposed to be you, big dog, then right away he just knows, like, okay, like he has to diagnose this situation and figure all this out while being this version of himself that's really more or less like a man out of time. And with him not so much having the experience of the Doctor Strange who had been here, he still nonetheless is a doctor, which for many years that in itself, that has been Doctor Strange's advantage, because even in situations where he may not be as powerful as who he's facing, or even in cases where he may be outnumbered, but with his ability to treat each situation as a patient and view conflicts just like their illnesses, to where then he can perform spells with surgical precision, and it's within that method that he does his best work. And that's precisely what he does here, because right away when he asks Captain America if these invasions are happening in populated places, to where Captain America then tells him no, because each of these guys who are popping up around the globe, they're more so just claiming territories and establishing themselves within these different areas that are more so isolated. And because of that, classic Doctor Strange, he advises that they ignore these guys for the moment, because their invasions are more so symptoms to a bigger condition, because if these warlords could, they'd be spreading out and conquering, but for whatever reason they're not, and the heroes need to figure out why. But more or less, Captain America, he doesn't like that strategy, so he tells classic Doctor Strange, like, look, okay, we need to talk face to face. So from there, he lets him know that him and the Avengers are on the way. But then it's here where Doctor Strange hears a voice in his head calling to him by name, with someone saying that they're coming for him. But when he rushes outside to check it out, he then finds that it's Clea, who just falls into his arms. And when he catches her, at first he doesn't recognize her, but then he's like, oh wait, you're the girl from the dark dimension. And in response, Clea's kind of like, well, I'm a little more than that. But then it's rather quickly where she lets them know that Agamon, Umar, Tibero, like all these people who appear to be invading, that they're actually fleeing from the same ones who have chased her here. And it's not too long after Clea arrives where we then find that she's being chased by the three mothers. And in the case of the three mothers, we learn more about them like as we go along, and I'll point out some things as we make our way through, but I'd say at this point, one of the most notable things is that this classic Doctor Strange, who doesn't necessarily know much of what's happening in the world at this point in his time, but he does recognize the three mothers, the word, the crawling, and the crown. And even though at this point we don't really get too deep into who they are, but instead we really more so get a taste of what they're made of. And as far as more of the details on them, I feel like we're gonna get more of the Strange Tales type of treatment, to where the bad guys just show up and Doctor Strange just explains everything. But initially when they show up, it's just time to fight. And because of that, classic Doctor Strange, he makes his stance. And he lets the three mothers know that this woman, she's under the protection of Doctor Strange, the master of black magic. And right away Mordo's like, oh yeah, I forgot that used to be your thing. But when the three mothers show up here, both Mordo and Kaecilius, they bounce, because really Mordo could care less if Doctor Strange dies again, but instead he's more concerned about getting at the person who killed Doctor Strange in the first place before he did. But as soon as they leave, the Avengers show up, and when classic Doctor Strange tells Cap that we gotta protect this woman, and Captain America's like, you mean your wife? And it's right then when this Doctor Strange gets a better notion of what Clea was referring to earlier. But at this moment, the three mothers, they're not gonna like just let the heroes sit here and have a conversation. And when they get here, the fight picks up pretty quick. But even still, it isn't long before we find out that with them coming here, and initially they had done that because they were following Clea, but even in that case, their mission is to take magic and feed it to their child, who of course they had to leave unattended in order to come here. And with them being met by the Avengers, to their surprise, they then take this as an opportunity to see what this world's defenders are made of, which which from there then takes their focus off of just going after Clea and instead fighting the Avengers, which as they would describe isn't really much of a fight, but instead more of a test which the Avengers had pretty much failed, because you have one by the name of Crown, she defeats Thor, and another known as the Crawling, who is made up of acid mouth worms, who takes down Iron Man, and a third one named the Word, who's like an alien mage priestess who's pretty much sized up the entire team and let the other mothers know that there's plenty of magic here for them to feed their child. And with saying that, she opens the door and the three mothers begin to leave. And at this point, we really don't know who this child is, and all we've really seen at this point is talks of the child making his way here from the outer planes, from like the demons who had attacked Strange Academy, in order to feed the souls of the children to this mysterious child. But even still, for the most part, we really don't know who or what we're dealing with. But as the three mothers leave in order to get back to this child who's unattended at the moment, they let classic Doctor Strange and the others know that they'll be back for Clea and everyone else. And it's a very troubling thing to hear, especially after these guys just beat the brakes off of Earth's mightiest heroes, who at this time are just incapacitated after this fight, which again was just said to be a test. But whenever they do get up, I will say that I'm pretty sure that with Captain America, in spite of him disagreeing with classic Doctor Strange, that he'll still be pretty open to hear what kind of suggestions he has on how to approach this. Alright, so jumping back in after the Avengers had just gotten destroyed by the three mothers, and it's always one of those things to where it's kind of like, okay, someone new and powerful shows up and they either beat the mess out of the heroes, or they deal heavy damage on someone super powerful, or just outright kill them, to where in recent years Galactus has kind of been that benchmark. And it's kind of like, okay, well we get it, you're new, you're powerful, okay. And this brawl was like that kind of introduction for the three mothers, of whom at this point their background is still much of a huge mystery. And all we really know is that they travel across dimensions to feed their child, and at this point with Doctor Strange dead, with him being the current Sorcerer Supreme, the world has lost its protective barrier, which has brought a number of cross-dimensional villains to Earth because they were fleeing from the three mothers, and doing this in hopes that the heroes of Earth would protect them. But like we'd seen, round one didn't go well for the heroes, and afterwards we then find that the heroes have made their way to Avengers Mountain to more or less regroup and figure out the next steps. But with going to Avengers Mountain, we first start off with the autopsy of Doctor Strange, which is being led by the younger, time-displaced Doctor Strange, who once again is like the slither of Doctor Strange's soul, who he had hidden many years back when he had removed and put away 1 week of his life, so that at the time of his actual death, a version of him could return so that he can make sure things were in order. But with him doing this autopsy, he's also accompanied by Jane Foster, and I can only imagine how weird it must be not only to just do your own autopsy, but to just be looking over your body just laying there, naked. And at that point, I would have just looked at Jane and been like, okay, first of all, we at the North Pole, so let me explain a couple things first. And I'm not even sure if that's a thing in post-mortem. But anyway, it's here where we see the two of them examine his present day body in order to see if they can find any abnormalities in his cause of death, other than the obvious signs. But also at the Avengers Mountain, it's here where we then go to Clea, who's telling the other Avengers and Wong everything she knows about the three mothers, which even still isn't like an entire backstory. Because for Clea, much like many of the others who we had seen flee to Earth, she only knows of the three mothers' reputation, as far as destruction and them hunting for magic in order to feed their child. But from what she shares here with the Avengers, she lets them know that the three mothers have come from beyond the outer planes, and that these three warrior queens from unknown lands, they've been carving their way across dimensions, and so far no one has been able to stand against them. No king or queen, warlord or warlock, entire armies have been laid to waste, and all for the need to feed their child. And that child Clea describes as the apex predator of the magical food chain, to where of course its most favorite dish will be powerful warlords or powerful magic users like Clea herself. But aside from this brief description, everything else is pretty much just left to speculation, cause she lets them know that some think that this isn't even a creature at all, but instead there's the idea that what her and others have witnessed is just a physical manifestation of what they can see in a physical space, almost as if there's more than what meets the eye with this Peregrine child. And Clea also speculates, like, since no one knows the full story of the three mothers, or even how they came about to be the ones who hunt down the people who wield magic in order to feed them to this child, but she imagines that whatever their story was, that it had to be a tragic one, which could also be a bit of foreshadowing to either one or all of the three mothers turning on the child later at some point. But then it's also here where Doctor Strange and Jane Foster get back from the autopsy, and Strange lets the heroes know mostly what we assumed from before, as far as his death being more than just a malicious attack, as far as the hands being removed from his body, which isn't needed to be done to kill someone. But through the course of the autopsy, he had also come to discover that this was a form of ritual, which I think was kind of obvious before. But then when Doctor Strange goes on to explain that with doing this, whoever killed him had effectively stolen his soul, which is the part that creates the other hitch, because without his soul truly passing on, there can be no new Sorcerer Supreme. And again, as far as the different villains who have come from different dimensions in order to avoid their deaths, they're just hiding on Earth because the world's heroes, and not just the Avengers, but the X-Men, everyone. Collectively, they have fought off a number of threats that have tried to take the Earth before. Whether it was Galactus, Dormammu, Annihilus, the heroes of Earth have defended it time and time again, and that's why the villains have re-established their home here. And when classic Doctor Strange points this out, he kind of tells the Avengers, like, with that said, I'm gonna leave it to you guys. Because as of now, he knows the why of his death, but he still has to figure out the how and who. And when Strange leaves with Wong and Clea, Tony pretty much just thanks him for leaving them with a full plate. But then it's after this when we go back to the Sanctum Sanctorum, and Clea, she releases the spirit that she refers to as Flibbertigibbet to search the world at the speed of thought to find items that were stolen from the late Doctor Strange and report back so they know where to find them. But while Flibbertigibbet is out looking for the doohickeys, Clea and classic Doctor Strange kind of have this moment to where at first there's like this awkward silence, and then Clea brings up about how the recent Doctor Strange had made her forget her memories of him after they had overcome so much and got back to the place to where there was a chance that they could be together. But of course at the time, with the more recent Doctor Strange taking the high road, which really and truly he kind of didn't have much of a choice, because at the time with the more recent Doctor Strange, who is now the late Doctor Strange, had got Mephisto's help with rebuilding the universe after shattering Galactus and all of reality with him. But this had then landed Doctor Strange in Mephisto's debt because of the good doctor's choice of words. And after the universe was all good and well, Mephisto had immediately called for Doctor Strange to honor his commitment. And it was really messed up because Mephisto had hit Doctor Strange with the, okay, you already know what I'm gonna ask. Like, I think Mephisto has a secret weakness for seeing other people booed up. Like, he just can't take it, can't have it. But it's here for Clea where she understands that the late Doctor Strange, like, he had to do what he had to do. But also when that Doctor Strange was killed, Mephisto had then released all those memories back to Clea all at one time, only for her to land into a greater suffering with her seeing and realizing that he was actually dead. And then on top of that, with her seeing this Doctor Strange, the classic Doctor Strange, who's very much the version of Steven who she had first met, and for Clea with seeing this younger Doctor Strange, right away it just brings back the memories and the feelings to a time when she was slowly realizing how the two of their souls had fit together. But it's also like that doesn't matter because this Doctor Strange hardly knows her. So for Clea, it's like an insult to injury on top of an insult to injury. But then it's here with classic Doctor Strange. Let me tell you about classic Doctor Strange. He then tells Clea that since he's come back and seen the pain of all his friends who he hasn't met yet grieving his death, which later was just topped with the global crisis which he has no idea on how to solve just yet, only then for that to be topped off with the fact that he only has days before he ceases to exist. But he then lets her know that the worst thing out of all of this is him learning that he lived to be a fool, because a man who had her heart and lost it, he could be called nothing else. And right there, she just lands one on him, cause Doctor Strange got game. But of course he stops this before it goes anywhere, because the Stephen Strange who Clea had fallen in love with, he has yet to be saved. But then it's here where Flibbertigibbet comes back from the worldwide search, and it's here where she tells them that she has found the Eye of Agamotto and the Cloak of Levitation, and they are both at Castle Mordo. And right away when they hear this, we just bust into this like split screen of two events taking place simultaneously, with Doctor Strange, Clea, and Wong making their way to Castle Mordo, but also the three mothers making their way to Kalamesh, the home of Dagoth the Dark One. And you can just tell like right away that in both cases that there's like this countdown to somebody getting their head whooped. You know what I'm saying? Because with classic Doctor Strange, he's calling out to Mordo, and at this point, he ain't even calling him Mordo or Baron Mordo anymore. But he's like, hey yo, Carl, like Carl, if you don't get your down here. And it's crazy because just the way that he's calling him out, it doubles perfectly with the three mothers going after Dagoth. Because when he calls out Carl, for just sticking to his old tricks by stealing power like Baron Mordo always has, unlike Doctor Strange who borrows power, there's a difference. But it's here where Doctor Strange calls out Mordo for borrowing power from Agamon, Tibero, Umar, and Dagoth after muling to Dormammu for Mordo to have the strength to face him. And as Doctor Strange, Wong, and Clea tear their way through here, Strange calls Mordo out like, man, you are an absolute coward, because it was these 4 magical signatures that Strange had found on his body throughout the course of his own autopsy. And with that discovery, on top of him finding out that the Eye of Agamotto and the Cloak of Levitation are here at Castle Mordo, everything's just pointing towards Mordo being the person who orchestrated Doctor Strange's death, since he knew it was something he could never do himself. And in the case of Dagoth, while we're seeing him getting abducted, this speech doubles as well for him because he serves Dormammu, and like we had talked about in the previous video, Dagoth has done his fair share of sacrifices in muling to Dormammu as well. But at this point, as we follow Dagoth, we come to find out for him that hasn't helped him too well, as we watch the three mothers offer Dagoth to their child, who, like we'd seen in Clea's explanation, this kid got way more head than he got body, with also a bit of a strange kind of beard thing going on too. But back at Castle Mordo, as Doctor Strange, Clea, and Wong approached Mordo's door, he's right on the other side clutching the cloak and the Eye of Agamotto, and at this point, from what it seems, he really wants to talk it out. But I kinda got this feeling that classic Doctor Strange, he said all that he's wanted to say. Alright, so with us jumping back in with classic Doctor Strange making his way to Castle Mordo because of everything that he had discovered which had led to the death of current Doctor Strange, and the discovery of those causes of his death had led him here, all the way to Baron Mordo, who not only has the Cloak of Levitation, but also the Eye of Agamotto. But with classic Strange, Clea, and Wong storming through Castle Mordo all the way up to Carl's chamber, to where initially he cowers behind the door, with classic Strange threatening his life on the other end. But then he has this moment to where he really remembers who he is, and he comes out from behind the door telling classic Doctor Strange like, look, I've done some stuff. And with them saying that, there's a laundry list of things that Mordo could go through, on top of what he mentions as far as murdering, stealing, and consorting with demons, to where for none of those things does he feel any remorse or regret. But then it's here where he does tell classic Doctor Strange that the one thing that he does regret is him being innocent of the murder of the current Doctor Strange, to where initially Wong then calls him a liar, but as Mordo goes on to explain that for one, he had just found the Cloak of Levitation and the Eye of Agamotto hidden here in his home, because whoever actually killed the current day Doctor Strange, they had wanted all of the causes and the evidence to point right to Baron Mordo. And with them saying this, initially classic Doctor Strange is like, so I'm just supposed to take you at your word? But when Mordo tells him that if he had actually done this, the last thing he would do is lie about it, even if his own life was on the line. And with hearing this classic Doctor Strange, he knows Mordo well enough to know that this is true. Which for classic Doctor Strange, it really just pulls the rug up from under his feet, because with all the evidence that he's found, whether within his own autopsy, and the tactics of the murderer stealing powers, which matches Mordo's MO 1-to-1, only for classic Strange to find out that it wasn't Mordo. But after this, when he heads back to the Sanctum with Clea and Wong, and it's here where he sent footage from Captain America that was captured by a British naval intelligence drone and sent to him by way of MI-13, to where in this footage they get the recent update of Dagoth being consumed, which like we'd seen was what was happening while they were at Castle Mordo. And with them getting this update, it's likely from here the three mothers just went to another dimension, so that from there they can just prepare for their next target, who would be the next meal. But with seeing this classic Strange is just like, we got lucky, with this incident only being contained to Kalamesh. And all he really knows is at this point, the school that current day Doctor Strange has started, it had been evacuated as a precautionary measure, but precautionary measures are not a plan, but rather it's more like an action being taken to minimize damage. And when Captain America had asked Doctor Strange on the update for his investigation, and he just told Cap that Mordo was a dead end, and before Cap hangs up, he tells classic Strange not to give up as he goes to put together a plan with the Avengers. But at this point from here, for classic Doctor Strange, he has no idea what he's about to do, with him literally having days left before he fades from existence. And for a moment, he even doubts the whole idea of him coming up with the contingency of having this portion of his soul come back for a week just to get here and not know what to do. So when Wong offers to liaise with the Avengers, while Classic Strange works on his next move, and Classic Strange more or less goes into a breakdown, because not only is this past version of Doctor Strange in an unfamiliar world, which in that case makes him a man out of time, but also with the world ending and his murder not being solved, along with the clock ticking for him, which quickly has him approaching the point of being a man who is literally out of time. And it really has him second guessing himself, like, what was I thinking? Like, who did I think I was? To believe that bringing a past version of myself back for a week was going to change anything. And it's here where Clea steps in, giving some very encouraging words, because with her telling him that he thought he was Doctor Strange, master of the black arts, which is something specifically he used to say a lot, but even more so important, if anyone, this is the Doctor Strange that needs to be here, because at this point in his life, though he doesn't know all the current events and much of what the current day Doctor Strange has learned along the way, but this previous version of Doctor Strange, he came from a time when Doctor Strange believed that he could fix anything. And it's here where Clea tells him that that's exactly who they need right now. But then also you get this moment where Bats steps in, and he also offers Strange a bit of comfort along with asking him if he wants to go for a walk, and it kind of gives classic Doctor Strange the opportunity to bond with Bats, since at his point in his life he had always wanted a dog but he just never had the time. But while they're out for this walk and classic Strange is kind of mulling over the idea of how it should have been Mordo with all the evidence pointing at him, but also because there's no one else he can think of who hates him more than Mordo. But then it's here where Bats gives some brilliant advice, and he tells classic Doctor Strange that he should think of it this way: who hates the both of you, and who would want to take you both out, two birds with one stone? Who would also be someone who not only knows Mordo's ways, but who would also know how to borrow power. And classic Strange kind of thinks it over because it would have to be somebody he's either defeated or hurt in some type of way. And for whoever this person is, it would also make sense that they would want to take away Mordo's greatest wish, as far as him wanting to be the person who killed Doctor Strange. But aside from that, Bats really isn't sure as far as who to really point the finger at, because it's likely that much of this happened before Bats' time and likely after classic Doctor Strange's, which right there is pretty much what sparks the idea, where classic Strange says he has a lead, and really he's pretty much figured out who exactly it is. And it's from here where he gathers together all the players so that they can bring this case to a close the proper way that a murder mystery should be done. And to get this ready, first he gets Wong, and he tells him to gather as many magicians as he can and to prepare them with the spell as quickly as possible, and preferably before the child consumes another warlord. But then as far as getting all the warlords gathered together in one place, he then gives that task to Clea, with her being the Sorcerer Supreme of the Dark Dimension, and she's pretty confident that she can get the others to assemble at the palace of her mother Umar. And so with everything into play, classic Strange heads to Antarctica, which is where Umar established her domain, but he heads here with Clea and Magic, with Magic having the X-Men on standby, but also with Wong elsewhere handling the spell with the other magicians, but also by way of Wong, the Avengers are also on standby. But with classic Strange getting everyone here for the big reveal, as far as the whodunit for the murder mystery, first he greets all the warlords and Carl, because of course the disrespect continues. And initially he gets a lot of pushback from Agamon and Tibero, because regardless of them showing up, Agamon finds it amusing as if they're all being put on trial, and Tibero sees it as a bit of a threat, as if classic Strange has assembled everyone here as a form of a fear tactic. And even in the case of Umar, she admits that she's only entertaining this whole gathering as a bit of a distraction from the impending threat as far as the three mothers who chased all of these guys to Earth. So rather quickly, she more or less tells classic Strange to just get on with it. And that's exactly what he does. But first, he takes off the bubble coat from under his cloak without taking off the cloak. Now that's magic. But then it's here where classic Strange breaks everything down before he gets into the conclusion and points out the murderer. And it's here where he points out that he was murdered by the powers of Umar, Tibero, Agamon, and the late Dagoth, to where all their powers were conjoined and channeled through a pawn. But classic Strange also points out that he didn't suspect that this was any kind of collaboration on their part, because the four of them would never work together, and not only because they're rivals, but also on top of that you could say it's also their pride, because even with them fleeing to Earth from the three mothers and being forced into the role of becoming prey, even still they brought their kingdoms with them, so it wasn't like they were all chasing to the same corner, and hiding out on Earth together had brought them closer by any means. And on top of that, with them coming to Earth in order to get the protection of Earth's heroes like the X-Men, the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, but this would have also included the Sorcerer Supreme. So common sense would tell you, you don't flee to someone for their protection and then team up and kill them. But then as classic Strange continues, he then goes on to say that with the way that this murder was done, with the removal of his hands and this person taking his soul and his power, this would of course benefit any sorcerer or any magician, but with how this was done, it was more than just someone taking power. It was personal, with not only Baron Mordo being framed, but also the killer knew that killing Doctor Strange would have hurt Baron Mordo's pride tremendously by robbing him of the opportunity to do it himself, causing Carl to live out the rest of his days knowing that he could never best Doctor Strange because his wind's low. But then it's here where classic Strange mentions that he was told that he had exiled a man into the purple dimension, a man who served a dire enemy of his. And with this man being exiled to the purple dimension, which is a place of much cruelty and much suffering, his master made no effort to try to save him. And it's because of that classic Strange just points him out, as if it wasn't clear at this point, that his murderer was Kaecilius. And Kaecilius, like when this happens, like he doesn't try to deny it or nothing. And he even reveals that he has the late Doctor Strange's hands in place of his own. And he declares that he's gonna make Baron Mordo suffer like he suffered in the purple dimension. And right after that, he's gonna kill classic Doctor Strange with his own power. But in the meantime, right outside, while they're going through this whole Scooby-Doo reveal, the three mothers and the Peregrine child are making their way to their location, which at this point is a palace full of all-you-can-eat sorcerers. But I'm pretty sure the contingencies that classic Doctor Strange has put in place, that they're kind of counting on that, as if he's also planned this arrangement to use all of these sorcerers as bait. Alright, so when we pick back up from Classic Strange making his case and revealing that Kaecilius was indeed the murderer of the present day Doctor Strange, with him having not only the motive to get back at Baron Mordo, for what is pretty much his lack of acknowledgement for Kaecilius being so loyal for so long, and for Kaecilius rather than just having a direct attack on Mordo, he had instead used this recent opportunity with all these Sorcerer Supremes from different dimensions making their way to Earth to steal power from them to overcome Doctor Strange and rob Baron Mordo of the kill that he had been trying to pull off for years. But on top of this big reveal, you also have the case of the three mothers who are like right outside, like they're finna crash this party at any second, which is the situation while classic Doctor Strange is being confronted by Kaecilius. But while this is happening, you also have Agamemnon, the Sorcerer Supreme of the purple dimension, who's like, look, okay, these three mothers is finna pull up and I ain't trying to be here. But when he attempts to make a portal for himself to leave before everything gets crazy, and it's here where classic Doctor Strange lets him know that he's not going anywhere, and neither are any of the other warlords. And when he says this, it's here where we jump to Wong, where we see him performing the task that Classic Strange had asked him to carry out, as far as gathering a number of magicians and getting them to learn some spell as quickly as possible. And come to find out, Wong and the others, they've come together and focused their magic on a binding spell, so they can make sure that none of these warlords could leave Umar's domain. Because again, not only is Classic Strange using these guys as bait, but he also needs all of them here for his plan to work. But also, as you would imagine, it's kind of hard to hold people in one spot when this is also the place where you do your big reveal for the murder mystery, and the same person that you called out to be the culprit is now trying to kill you. And on top of this, to make matters worse, Kaecilius, he's made sure at this point, with him having current Doctor Strange's hands and his soul as a power buff, that he's shielded himself so that no combat spell can affect him, but also no weapon can do him harm. And he made sure that this was done so he can't take physical damage, his spirit can't be harmed, his mind can't be controlled. Like, he put a lot of thought into this. But even with him creating all these contingencies, classic Doctor Strange does one spell, and this spell was the last thing that Kaecilius was thinking of. Because for one, this spell was no way an attack on Kaecilius, but instead classic Doctor Strange did a healing spell on his own future hands that had been taken, which at this point are still attached to Kaecilius' body. And right away when I first seen this, I was like, man, this is brilliant. But at the same time, I was kind of like, oh man, this is dark. Because with Classic Strange effectively looking to Kaecilius, who has both hands and the soul of current day Doctor Strange, which he's effectively using as a weapon, and he's pretty much just looked at him and said, okay, well 5 to 10% of the current Doctor Strange is there, so just heal him, make that 100%, which as a result, this completely consumes Kaecilius. And while this is happening, he tells Classic Strange, like, this is inhuman. But Classic Doctor Strange lets him know, like, he's the master of black magic, which is what Doctor Strange used to say a lot back then. But even with him saying this now, he lets Kaecilius know that when he needs to go there, he'll go there. And this was definitely one of your darkest examples of that, with Kaecilius effectively suffering from death by transmutation. But after this healing process is fully complete, your current Doctor Strange is fully formed, and Kaecilius, he's just gone. But with this happening in the classic Doctor Strange successfully solving the murder of the current Doctor Strange, we then jump over to the next phase of his plan, to where right outside he's called in the Avengers and the X-Men to show up in Antarctica to come together to fight against the three mothers and the Peregrine child. But also with how this is done, when we jump back to both of the Doctor Stranges, and with how this is done with us like on one hand jumping to the fight outside and then jumping back in, it's done in a way to where we miss the details of classic Doctor Strange's plan. But even with that being the case, we do get a moment to where we hear classic Doctor Strange telling current Doctor Strange, like from one dead man to another, to make sure that he heeds his advice, because however this plays out, classic Doctor Strange, his time is almost up, and almost as a request for a favor in return, he demands that Doctor Strange does something, and we'll see what that is in a little bit. But with him demanding that Doctor Strange does this, they reassure the warlords to play their part, because it's kind of a we all make it out or none of us make it out kind of situation. But then also classic Doctor Strange, he reminds current Doctor Strange to make sure that he follows through with his demand, because after he plays his part here, current Doctor Strange has to follow through to make sure that it was all worth it. But then after this, as they make their way outside and we see the X-Men and the Avengers Avengers fighting against the three mothers and the child. And on one hand, we're shown this fight in a way to where it's like, okay, the Avengers and the X-Men, like, they're not gonna win. Like, if it were left to them alone and they had the means or the power to overthrow the three mothers and the child, then that would have happened well before this point. But instead, with how this is done, it's really just done like giving us a quick look at Earth's heroes who have leaped into a battle a number of times that they knew they couldn't win, which again is the reason why all these warlords had fled to Earth. But then on the other hand, it's also a bit of Jed MacKay flexing on how powerful the three mothers are, as well as the Peregrine child, because together they are given the business to Starbrand, Echo with the Phoenix Force, to Jean Grey, one of the world's most powerful telepaths, to Captain Marvel, to Thor. And you can really tell right away it's the common method to where you bring in somebody new that nobody knows nothing about, let them just beat the snot out of Earth's mightiest heroes so we can see how powerful they are. And it's the same thing when somebody gets a power buff. Kind of like what we've been seeing going on with Galactus for the past 5-6 years. And really it's been longer than that, but you guys know it's ramped up lately. But really what this comes down to is this moment where Doctor Strange is like, okay, these aren't enemies who can be just defeated by strength, or really any warrior for that matter, because these enemies have to be defeated by sorcerers. And it's here where Doctor Strange more or less takes a page out of Kaecilius' playbook, but in this case on a whole nother level, with him combining the power of 5 different Sorcerer Supremes, starting with himself as the Sorcerer Supreme of Earth, Taboro as Sorcerer Supreme of the 6th Dimension, Agamon Sorcerer Supreme of the Purple Dimension, Magic Sorcerer Supreme of Limbo, and Clea Sorcerer Supreme of the Dark Dimension. Because again, none of them individually had the power to combat the three mothers, but collectively these 5 were more than the three mothers can handle. And with this being the case, of course, the three mothers, they call out for the child to lend them more power, which right away made me think of Power Rangers for some reason, I don't know. But with doing this, the three mothers, they get a power buff, and immediately after this, classic Doctor Strange goes in his astral form and he races for the Peregrine child. And when this happens, he's caught and he's eaten. But current day Doctor Strange, he assures the other sorcerers that Classic Strange knows what he's doing. This is part of the plan and Classic Strange knows his part. And what we quickly come to find out is that Classic Strange first confronted the Peregrine child in his astral form, because otherwise he would have just been destroyed. But instead, with him making his way in his astral form, this way he's now able to access all the magic that's inside the Peregrine child, so that he can use this power and attack the child from the inside out. And when this happens, the child just holds his stomach like, oh man, I ate something really strange. And right away you can tell the thing knows that it set itself up. But with Classic Strange doing this, he effectively sacrifices himself. But then also along with doing this, your current day Doctor Strange, he tells Classic Strange to force the mothers and the child out and scatter them across the dimensions so that the child can detonate somewhere else at a safe distance, but also so that the three mothers can be stranded. But with this happening and the heroes collectively effectively having the win. And also at this point, classic Doctor Strange, he's no longer in the picture. But it's at this point where we then get a moment between current Doctor Strange and Clea, where he tells Clea what classic Doctor Strange demanded of him, which was for him to hold on to Clea as long as he could, or for as long as she would have him. And of course in response, Clea's like, I'm not going anywhere. Because again, it's not like these two had separated or broke up like some traditional relationship, like these two got Mephisto. So clearly with them back together and Clea's memories restored, she wouldn't want to have it any other way. And really if either one of them were being held to doing this, that would be Doctor Strange for not choosing his words carefully and falling into Mephisto's trap after receiving Mephisto's help. But even in this case with them finally reunited, as it turns out, Doctor Strange coming back wasn't a proper resurrection. And it's in this moment where Doctor Strange tells Clea that the younger version of himself, he was right about one thing, but he was wrong about another, because his life cannot be stolen from death so easily. And it's for that reason that she will take back what is hers. And right when he says this, he then starts to fade away, asking Clea for one last favor as he leaves her with the Eye of Agamotto and the Cloak of Levitation. Because as of this point forward, Doctor Strange is effectively dead. And that's really all that we're left with. But moving forward, with Clea already being Sorcerer Supreme of the Dark Dimension, and now her being Sorcerer Supreme of Earth, and I'll admit, this has me excited to see where Jed MacKay is going to take this in March when the new Strange series comes out. At least I believe it's coming in March. And I'm excited because I really want to see what Clea, the Sorcerer Supreme, versus Mistress Death is going to look like. Which at this point, I'm just assuming that we're going to see to some measure within that story, because it seems like the most likely continuation. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below so you can go to patreon.com/DopeSpill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And also let me know what you think about the new Strange series, with the idea of it bringing in Clea as the Sorcerer Supreme, because I'm curious to hear you guys' thoughts and theories of what might be around the corner. But with that said, that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.